Pawan, please mute
Sir,
everybody.
I'll mute everybody. So speakers and moderators can unmute themselves.
So, good evening, senior colleagues, friends. Welcome to the 15th edition of Thursday Musings. And today's topic is basically therapeutic contexts and processes, categorical nuances. Many people actually asked me what is the meaning of the topic. I told them I was as confused as you all are. The only problem with Dr. Seshadri's talk today will be the topic's name. Rest all will be as good as it can be. So, sir is the epitome of Thursday musings. Sir will explain everything, what the queries we had about last time and all. So, let me introduce our chairperson, Dr. Tufan, sir. Pawan, can we have a slide of Dr. Tufan?
Less than a minute, please.
Is it visible, sir?
Yeah. So next slide. So today is the 15th edition. So Dr. Tufan Pati is professor and head in the department I work in. He is in all IPP. If you look at IPS subcommittee in the state branch, he does everything, whatever happens in Odisha state branch, small state, a lot of activities occur and all due to the, he does everything. You tell him to organize a conference in one day, he will do it. So he's vice chairman IPP, editor of the Industrial Psychiatry Group, winner of Madhu Sabhiman and 4 Avenues of Service Awards. He's an active Rotary Club member. Sir, over to you, Dr. Tufan.
Thank you, Amrit, for an elaborate introduction. Half a minute would have done equally well. And with this, I have the responsibility to introduce the two stalwart futures of Indian Psychiatric Society, assets of Indian Psychiatric Society, whom you will see in this Thursday musing as the moderators. Dr. Alim Siddiqui, who is a direct EC member of IPS, and he's active, enthusiastic, well-informed, and much admired young leader of Indian Psychiatric Society. And with him, we have also Dr. Amrit Joshi, who started the meeting. He's also a direct EC member of Indian Psychiatric Society. We work together in Bhubaneswar. We work together in the same medical college. We work together at many other places together. He's active, energetic, up-to-date, and acclaimed young leader of IPS. With this, I welcome both the moderators. And Alim, Pawan, please share. The next slide. We have with us our chairman, Dr. Brigadier MSBK Raju, who is a veteran Armed Forces Medical Services of India. He is the past president of Indian Psychiatric Society. He is the past president of SARC Psychiatric Federation and his own section representative of WPA, and he ex-professor and HOD of Armed Forces Medical College, Pune. He has got many laurels to his credit, but this is a brief introduction. Next one, please. Dr. Jayan Das is a senior consultant psychiatrist in Guwahati. He is the chairperson of the school mental health specialty section of IPS and the president of IAPP Assam State Branch, is the founder president of Manan Nirmay. With this, I welcome the chairpersons, and I personally express my gratitude to both of them because they have immediately agreed to chair the sessions when I requested them. Thanks, Professor Raju, and thanks, Dr. Das. And with this, I hand over the meeting to the chairpersons. The stage is yours, sir. And today we are just after Dashera, the symbolic win of truth over falsehood, and let us seek truth. We have got Dr. Seshadri with us. To the chairperson, please.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'll take off from where Amrit has started. I'll just talk briefly on the topic of today's discussion. I am as much clueless as Amrit is actually. But considering psychiatry is a very unique subject, branch of medicine, they call it. I call it a complete package of medicine. Psychiatry straddles across medical science, of course, neuroscience, social sciences, philosophy, and whatnot. So, seeing from the title of the of the topic, I thought Dr. Seshadri has chosen a wide, broad canvas, and he's an acknowledged specialist in child and adolescent psychiatry. I don't know where he will start and where it will end, but I'm sure, knowing Professor Seshadri, he speaks with authority, and whatever he speaks with a great amount of clarity. And I'm sure that after listening to him today or the next an hour or so, we will be much more in touch with the new nuances or whatever he calls as categories. I don't know. There is a broad topic. In psychiatry itself, there are so many branches. In child and adolescent psychiatry itself, there are so many branches, in all of which is involved, right from child sexual abuse, violence, and whatnot, learning disabilities. And he has something up his sleeve called forum theater, which I'll come to later when I conclude this session. So over to my colleague, Dr. Jayanta Das, to introduce the speaker of today, Professor Shekhar Seshadri, and let us get on with the discussions. Over to Dr. Jayanta Das.
Yeah.
Not audible. Not audible. Unmute.
Sir, Dr. Das, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Now, am I audible?
Yeah, you're not audible.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Brigadier Raju. Thank you, Dr. Tufan Patti, Amrit, and Alim. And thank you so much for giving me this honor to share this very unique and prestigious session, which will be addressed by Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. Today, I'm really feeling very privileged and happy that I have the very pleasant task of introducing Dr. Shekhar, who is like my brother, and we are very good friend. We have a very long association. I think Dr. Shekhar will agree to that. Now, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri is a graduate of Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi, and a postgraduate in psychiatry from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He is currently Senior Professor, Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and Associate Dean of Behavioral Sciences, NIMHANS, Bangalore. Besides working with child and adolescent mental health, including developmental disabilities, he is actively involved in the areas of gender and sexualities, violence, trauma, and abuse, children in difficult situations, juvenile justice, experiential methodologies, school program, teachers training, life skill education, community and school mental health programs, forum theaters, and qualitative research, and whatnot. So Shekhar itself is an institution I'd like to level like this. So I'm sure this is a very unique topic, as Amrit has mentioned. A lot of people are wondering what is the topic is all about. Now, let us hear from Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. I'm sure we are going to have a very exciting session ahead of us. Dr. Shekhar, over to you.
Thank you very much, Amrit. Thank you very much, Dr. Tofan. Thank you very much, Brigadier Raju. Thank you very much, Jayantuda. It's such a pleasure to meet Brigadier Raju and Jayantuda after a long time, and I would share their sentiments about the camaraderie and the friendship and the remarkable fraternity that we share. There is no mystery to what I'm going to be sharing today, though Amrit and Jayantuda and Brigadier Raju have created a mystery of kya bolne wala hai, and what is this topic about. That. Let me clear the mystery for you, and for those of you who like mystery stories and in how they go on. And there is a word which is called denouement. It's French origin. Uska spelling mat पूछेगा. Denouement means कि आखिर में जब पूरा पता लगता है कि सच्चाई क्या है, वास्तविकता क्या है. So that's called the denouement. It's used in fiction, it's used in literature, it's used in films as well. So let me start with clearing the mystery for you to begin with. What actually happened was that I did a session on relating the nuances of life skills education to a risk model for therapeutic work in adolescent mental health. And there was a lot of activity level on chat and on questions to this remarkable initiative of Thursday Musings, which the IPS Odisha state branch has initiated. And kudos to you. I made a promise to Dr. Tofan and to Amrit that it would be such a pity if this vibrancy of audience participation were left unattended and unaddressed, because there's so much of interest that was generated in the last talk that I said we should have a follow-up session. So here is what I did. There were a total of 69 comments posted on chat. There were more, but some of them were, good evening, good night, lovely to see you, wonderful, how handsome Amrit is, and so.
Okay.
And I have a team here in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which is the only independent department of child and adolescent psychiatry in India, the first department to start a DM program. And I said, yes, 69 comments, questions, issues. Iska thematic analysis karo. And my team put together a thematic analysis of this, which is a qualitative research paradigm. And it came into three major themes. Each theme had sub-themes and each sub-theme had content. And that's what I'm going to share with you. And we're going to take each of these and navigate through the nuances of the sub-themes to build on therapeutic constructs of how to work with adolescent psychotherapy. So that clears the mystery. Let me get to the substance of this now. Participant queries. Amrit gives me a thumbs up if you can see this on screen share. Cool. The three major themes that emerged, let me do this again. I beg your pardon. Yeah, the three major themes that emerged were one, pertaining to life skills training, two, to therapeutic interventions with adolescents, and three, to parenting teens. ये 69 चैट पे जो आए, इसका हमने thematic analysis जो किया, ये तीन मुख्य भाग में the themes were divided. Let's take them one by one. Let me go only to life skills training. The sub-theme was about the intervention itself. What does it mean? Is it different from therapy? What is the time frame of this intervention? Is it one time or is it ongoing? What are the approaches to life skills training? Who can be a trainer? What is the role of parents, teachers, professionals in training? Is there a particular trainer for a particular skill or can anyone do anything then? Let me dwell on this to begin with. What does it mean? Is it any different from therapy? I want to relate this to a basic concept which I borrow from John Bowlby, and that's called attachment. अब इस पे थोड़ा गौर फरमाइए. Friends, what is the difference between a concept, a theory, an approach, and a methodology? Now, this is important because theoretically or conceptually, this sharp distinction between ये therapy है, ये life skills है, ये falana therapy है, this splitters versus those who, you remember this old debate in psychiatry, the splitters and the people who do the sandhi, the consolidation. Let me explain to you, taking attachment theory, the difference between a concept, a theory, an approach, and a methodology. What is the concept of attachment as propounded by John Bowlby? The concept is that attachment experiences is necessary for optimal child development. ये concept है. What is the theory? The theory is that there is secure attachment and there is insecure attachment, and there are different types of insecure attachment. Even children in stable families, intact families, can have insecure attachment if there is parental discord and the mother frequently goes away to her maike. There are attachment injuries that are caused by emotional abuse. So ye theory hai. What is the approach? The approach is, if a child comes or an adolescent comes with a presentation, a clinical manifestation, which we clearly relate the origins of to attachment injuries, the therapist provides an emotionally corrective attachment experience to basically mitigate or heal the attachment injuries. अब सवाल ये उठता है कि approach क्या है? ये approach है. Method क्या है? कैसे करोगे? And that's what we mean by methodology. We do it with play. We do it with paper pencil tasks. We do it with narrative work and building stories. We do it by validation and encouraging, experiences of success, experiences of self-esteem. Now, this distinction is very important to keep in mind, where the difference between life skills training and therapy is concerned. So I do not see any distinction. It is how you use the distinctions between a concept, a theory, an approach, and a methodology, and you build the two together to really assist a given adolescent in a given situation for what is best for him or her. So this is what life skills training means. अब इसको हम थिएटर टेक्निक्स के साथ करते हैं, रोल प्ले के साथ करते हैं, डायरी राइटिंग के साथ करते हैं, सेल्फ मॉनिटरिंग के साथ करते हैं. What is the time frame for this intervention? Is it one time or is it an ongoing process? Is there anything known as a single session therapy? Yes, there is. Can skill building be done in one session? It depends on the duration of the session. It depends on the strength of the relationship and the therapeutic alliance. But let's look at this very important word here, and that word is the word process. In any technique that we use, I spoke about concept, theory, approach, and methodology. Let me present another paradigm to you. Intent, content, methodology, and process. I'm in a session. What is my intent in that session? What do I want to achieve with my client? Reduction of anger outbursts? Insight about behavioral decisions? What is the content of that session? Do I speak about the sources of anger, severity of anger dimensions, the consequences of anger? Content. What is the methodology? Will I use films? Will I see a film that violence की बात करते हैं? Shall we see a film? कौन सी film देखें? Intelligent adolescent है. Shall I see one of Shyam Benegal's second film, Nishant? Nishant की कहानी क्या है? एक जमींदार family है. Amrish Puri is the patriarch of the family. He has 3 brothers. played by Anantnag, Mohan Agashe, and Nasiruddin Shah. Nasiruddin Shah is of an inhibited character. His wife is Smita Patil, a sweet person. Girish Karnad is the village teacher. Shabana Azmi is his wife. Pandit Satyadev Dubey is the Purohit of that village. Shabana Azmi, the wife of the village teacher, is abducted by the Zamindar family, kept captive, and sexually molested. Nasiruddin Shah is karu nahi karu, but Smita Patil, his wife, is sympathetic. The village teacher Girish Karnad is helpless. The Purohit, Pandit Satyadev Dubey, ultimately incites the people, and the film culminates when violence erupts in the village, and Smita Patil, the sympathetic wife of the youngest brother, also gets killed. What is the moral of the story that Shyam Benegal says in Nishant? When violence escalates, it does not distinguish between good and bad. In the language of war, my friends, this is called collateral damage. औरतें मर गई, बच्चे मर गए, sorry, ये युद्ध में तो होता है ऐसा. It's called collateral damage. We see this film methodology and then we process. इस film की कहानी क्या है? किरदार कौन थे? Who are the characters? What do you learn about conflict resolution and violence from this? What is it that you take from the film that you can apply in your own life? This is called processing. फिर होता है मेटा प्रोसेसिंग. मेटा प्रोसेसिंग का मतलब यह है कि फर्स्ट लेवल प्रोसेसिंग किया. मेटा प्रोसेसिंग मतलब अगले सेशन पे जब आया, when he came to the next session, what did you apply? Was it successful? How do you feel now emotionally? Do you feel more in control? So these are the kind of approaches to life skills training, and anyone can be a trainer. And in the website that I had shared the last time, and I will put it on chat again, www.nimhanschildproject.in. I repeat, www.nimhanschildproject.in. If you go to the section on interventions and you go on adolescence or 7 to 12, you'll see a whole lot of methodologies that even parents can use it, even professionals can use it. And yes, there is skill-based training, and this is the beauty. If you have life skills, decision-making, problem-solving, critical thinking, creative thinking, effective communication, जो 10 life skills हैं, they operate in certain contexts. Decision-making in a gender context, decision-making in a peer pressure context, decision-making in a conflict context, decision-making in academic choice. And the triangulation between life skill and decision and the context is completed by the pedagogy or the method, experiential methodology. In a given context, more than one life skill may operate. Peer pressure है तो वहाँ decision making भी होगा. How do you cope with stress? वो भी होगा. Assertive skills भी आएगा. And how do you use theater methodology to actually practice assertive skills or refusal skills? So yes, it's not about a particular trainer for a particular skill, but it's about particular methodologies, and anyone can be a trainer. So to go back, 3 major themes emerge from what you put in: life skills, therapeutic interventions, parenting teens. Life skills में ये एक बात आई. Sub-theme about the intervention. Another sub-theme that came was, what are the specific skills addressed? What are the various skills? Problem solving, decision making, empathy, issues of gender and sexuality. How can life skills training be translated to building healthy routines in children and adolescents? And how do you build life skills into curriculum, facilitating generalization of skills? So let me take 2 issues here. Let me take the issue of empathy and let me take the issue of gender and sexuality as an example, and how we navigate it in therapy. Babies are natural born empaths. A baby will start crying if she sees someone else crying without knowing why that other person is crying. There are 3 processes that systematically destroy this basic gift that a child has of empathy. They are called parenting, education, and growing up. This is the irony. अपना टिफिन किसी के साथ मत बांटना. Don't be helpful. Look after your own interests. Now, one often wonders, can empathy really be taught, or is it something inborn? Now, babies have inborn empathy, and how do you really do skill training in empathy? There are two ways to do it in therapeutic work. One is called the helpful responses approach. And let me explain this when we do therapy training. There is a trainer, and there are trainee therapists. We give certain VNets. One VNet, for example, is my husband came home last night. He was very drunk. He hit me. He broke the television set. I just didn't know what to do. If you wanted to be helpful, what would you say next? We do it as a written exercise in empathy training or empathic responses. मेरा शौहर कर घर आया, बहुत पिया हुआ था, गुस्से में था, खौफ में था, मुझे मारा, टीवी तोड़ दिया, मुझे पता नहीं लगा करूं क्या. अगर आप मदद करना चाहते हैं तो आप क्या कहेंगे? The trainee writes, I will try to be reassuring. My response to that is, I am not asking you what your intention is. Your intention to be reassuring is important and significant. What will you say? And it's very interesting what people write. It's a written assignment. My husband came home last night. He was very drunk. He hit me, broke the television set. I just didn't know what to do. If you wanted to be helpful, what would you say next? Did you do anything to provoke him? Now, how is that helpful? No, you must not allow that to happen. Why don't you go away to your mother's place? Now, how is that helpful? As opposed to saying, that must have been very difficult. How did it end? How are you feeling now? Is everything all right? So you see the difference in an empathic response there. The other thing that we do with adolescents is we really look at pro-social rituals and actually prescribe some kind of pro-social work. बाजू के अनाथ आश्रम में, बाजू के वृद्ध आश्रम में हफ्ते में एक बार जाके कुछ जो जिसको हम श्रमदान कहते हैं. Or we watch films about people's lives. See, I'll tell you one thing. Harsh Mandar, in the context of food security, once said that lack of empathy is not a lack of feeling. He said, lack of empathy is primarily not a lack of feeling. Of course, it is a lack of feeling, for the other persons. He said, lack of empathy is primarily a lack of imagination. It is our failure to imagine other people's lives. जो झुग्गी झोपड़ी में रहते हैं, the disadvantaged, the disenfranchised, the abused, उनका जीवन कैसा है सुबह से शाम तक, कहाँ रहते हैं, कैसे रहते हैं, क्या खाना बनाते हैं, क्या खाते हैं. आपके घर में जो काम करती है, खाना बनाती है, झाड़ू पोछा करती है, उसकी जिंदगी क्या है, वो कहाँ रहती है, कितने कमरे हैं वहां, बाथरूम घर के अंदर है या कम्युनिटी वाला है, साफ है गंदा है, what is their life? It's a failure of imagination. And therefore, when you do therapeutic work where you look at imaginative techniques, and this is why films are so important. And we have a library of 70, 80 films that we use, films about children, and we watch them and create this processing and meta-processing to really fire their imagination. A last word on another issue here, on the sub-theme of the specific skills. Abhi we are still on life skills. Abhi to pura thematic analysis from aaye nahi hai. On issues of gender and sexuality. अब देखिए, the problem with gender and sexuality in any adolescent work, it's a reduction to reproductive biology. You reduce sexuality to reproductive biology, and you reduce reproductive biology to the penetration ejaculation paradigm. But sexuality and gender is much wider than that. It's about relationships. It's about communication, commitment, love, aesthetics, shared hopes and dreams. So we look at what is called as a window approach in life skills training. And all this is present in the website that I spoke to you about, www.nimhanschildproject.in. और विंडो क्या है? हम पहले रिश्तों की बात करते हैं. What are the different kinds of relationships? Filial relationships, parent-child, friendship, peer, workspace, and then comes romantic relationships. We speak about choices, about health, about safety, about privacy, about boundaries, about consent. उसके बाद हम gender और sexuality पे आते हैं. So this is called as a window approach. So they have a very comprehensive framework where they make good choices about their behaviors. So this is how life skills training can be translated into building healthy routines. And it's not about saying ye karo, ye mat karo. It's about giving a framework in which the various aspects around sexuality, not reducing it to an act. The context of a relationship. Are you talking about the legitimacy of sexuality in the context of a socially sanctioned relationship, VIZ marriage? The legitimacy of sexuality in a loving, caring, respectful, long-term relationship, not necessarily marriage. Are you talking about sexuality in a respectful, romantic, exciting relationship? But you've had other relationships. This may or may not last, but there is respect, there is chemistry. Are you talking about a one-night stand, but someone you know, someone you respect, good person, but it's about, or are you talking about कि आँख पे पट्टी बांध दो कोई भी चलेगा? So what is your ideology? And how safe, how private, how dignified, how consenting, how healthy? So the idea is a happy, healthy, and safe sexuality and responsible. So happy, healthy, safe, and responsible. So that's the kind of discussion. Baki, you do this with 10 people, 2 of them will still make idiotic and stupid decisions in their life. But so do all of you. And all of us. All the hundreds of people who are present, we also make mistakes in our life. But कम से कम वो 8 लोग जो हैं वो सोचेंगे ना. Another aspect of life skills sub-theme, in different contexts. Children in adverse circumstances, like pathological families where there is parental psychopathology like addiction, adolescents belonging to the LGBT community, adolescents with non-suicidal self-injury, and how to provide a cultural context to life skills training, the global versus the local, and how to deliver life skills training in schools and what are the resources. जहां तक कि resources का प्रश्न है, I've been repeatedly telling you that the website is there. Please feel free to pass it on. It's public domain, free access. I've said we don't believe in copyright. We believe in copyleft. Use it, adapt it, pass it on. Just acknowledge us, that's all. But I had presented the risk model for children in adverse circumstances the last time. We all know of Amrit Pattajoshi's serious engagement in the IPS section on sexuality, particularly with LGBT, and the enormous work that they're doing to mainstream it, and all the work that other members of IPS, in fact, Sage has started a journal now called the Journal of Psychosexual Health. And look at where we have traveled from what the scenario was 15, 20 years ago, where homosexuality was still a disease, and see where we have come. But how do you support the rights for those children with gender dysphoria? And we must understand that, of 10 children who have gender dysphoria, a certain percentage will actually normalize. A certain percentage are actually gay. They are not trans, and it's only a certain percentage who have trans identity. And therefore, to actually support and strengthen our therapeutic work, we must be familiar with what used to be called the Harry Benjamin criteria. Now it's called the World Professional Association of Trans Health, 7th edition. और उसमें guidelines दी हुई है. If a kid has a trans identity, how do you support this person? And how do you look at their lives? And the struggles that they go through because of the pernicious triangulation of patriarchy, heterosexism, and homophobia. So partly therapeutic work is not just with that individual child, it's advocacy for that child with the parents and the extended family. Their own heterosexist and homophobic and transphobic beliefs. And how do you gently assist them in understanding to be more embracing and more inclusive of. So this is the kind of cultural context that अब हमारे cultural context में जो अर्धनारीश्वर की बात, we have so many of this stuff in. I must tell you, the first time that I came to Odisha at the invitation of Amrit, and on my way back, when he said कि flight फलाने time है, आप जगन्नाथ पुरी जाना चाहेंगे या सन टेम्पल जाना चाहेंगे? I said उतना time नहीं है, सन टेम्पल जाता हूँ. And friends, how many thousands of years ago this temple was built? Absolutely explicit sexuality. We were an enlightened and an emancipated race thousands of years ago. What happened to us here? Look at how sexuality has got distorted to rape and abuse and HIV, and the entitlement of men for coercive sexuality, where we were an enlightened race. And Odisha was the hinterland. स्रोत था ये of an emancipated approach to. तो ये कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट जो है, हम जिस धरती के आप लोग हैं, to use these cultural contexts to basically reduce the anxiety that many of these parents have to look at. The next part, the second main theme that came is the theme of psychotherapy. Uska sub theme tha कि therapist कैसे choose करें. When does your child or adolescent need to see a therapist? What are the red flags? Does it depend on parental views and concerns, particularly for sexual issues? Does therapist characteristics matter, like the nature of the therapist or the gender? And what are the concerns in choosing a therapist or seeking help in the context of disagreement between parent and adolescent views? Now, here's the funny thing here, that ये red flags की जब हम बात करते हैं, I want to introduce another concept, and that's called threshold of tolerance. Many adolescents who are brought to us, we feel do not have a problem, neither in terms of diagnosis, कोई diagnosis नहीं है, but they have crossed the parents' threshold of tolerance. कुछ experimentation है, या अगर लड़की है तो इसके लड़के ज्यादा दोस्त हैं, और अगर लड़का है तो इसकी लड़कियां ज्यादा दोस्त हैं, या बहुत ज्यादा टाइम फोन पे बात करता है. तो almost as though these parents have forgotten their own adolescence. जैसे कि आप लोग जब adolescent थे, बहुत ही आज्ञाकारी थे, आप सब बात मानते थे, और सब संत थे आप लोग. आपके मन में कोई टेम्पटेशन नहीं था, आप सेक्स के बारे में नहीं सोचते थे. I mean, come on, yeah, lighten up. So they bring this kid, and often they misrepresent facts कि फलाने यहाँ जा रहे हैं, and and actually the truth has not been told, and how do you therefore establish your legitimacy? How does this adolescent know that you're not an extension of the same pernicious system that has dragged them there with false representations? Now, there are obvious red flags. ये लाल लाल यहाँ निशान हो तो red flag नहीं तो और क्या है? And the reason I'm stating this, that for every time an adolescent self-harms, can you imagine the number of times they would have thought it in their head? So it's not about getting agitated. It's about saying, look, there is an issue here. There is a problem. I'm not saying you're the problem or you're creating the problem. There is a situation. All of us need assistance. And your viewpoint is as important as ours. हम सिर्फ आपकी राय, आपका दृष्टिकोण, आपके विचार, आपकी धारणाएं को समझना चाहते हैं ताकि we are able to assist you better that. So it is not that parental views and concerns are to be belittled or dismissed. They're important. But how symmetric are you in terms of how much of time do you give to the parents, and how do you maintain issues of confidentiality and boundaries? And these are nuances of how you tell an adolescent that there are some times that I may have to speak to your parents, but if I do so, I will always seek your permission. I will tell you exactly what I'm going to tell them, and I'll do so in your presence, so that you don't have the anxiety that. I don't think that the nature or the gender of the therapist really matters. What matters are two basic principles: authenticity and therapeutic alliance. Children and adolescents are very astute judges of authenticity. They know when someone is genuine and when someone is fooling around. And therapeutic alliance build करने में कभी-कभी समय लगता है. Sometimes the bond occurs very fast. Sometimes, it takes several sessions to really, for the adolescent to be convinced that, this person is genuine. And ultimately, जो disagreement की बात है, see, it's a question of triangulation. Parent system है, parent concerns है, adolescent है, and as a therapist, where do you triangulate yourself? Do you triangulate yourself between the adolescent's viewpoints and concerns and his or her own choices? Or do you triangulate yourself between parental concerns and parental well-being? Because they're also agitated. Parents are sleepless. They're saying, Doctor साहब, हमारा तो भी थोड़ा ख्याल रखिए ना. सो नहीं पा रहे हैं, और इनके पिता ऑफिस नहीं जा पा रहे हैं, because घर में ऐसी खलबली मची है. There's so much of turmoil at home. So it is not to trivialize that or brush it aside, but it's a question of strategic triangulation. And triangulation, again, can be in a given session, or it can be a process that spreads the 6 or 7 sessions that you have. So this kind of flexibility, so that the parents are also reassured, and as is the adolescent, is very necessary too. The next thing, the sub-theme that came in the second major theme of therapy is the therapeutic alliance. And how important is it? How do you handle collusion between a therapist, child, and parents? Whom to side? And how to work when there are conflicting goals of parents and clients? And how to handle parents' refusal to consent for therapy, and how to address parental attitudes in therapy, and respecting the adolescent's need for autonomy, and how to refocus on adolescent goals, which are mainly outcome or achievement oriented rather than process or effort oriented. And this is particularly partly related to what I said, when we spoke about choosing a therapist. Though therapeutic alliance का मामला जो है, I cannot overemphasize its importance. It is the most important. And if the adolescent has a conviction about the authenticity of that alliance, then any collusion, any conflict, any refusal, any attitude, and any conflicts around autonomy automatically fall on because alliance ultimately is completely process oriented. It's not about the presenting complaint. It's not about गुस्सा कम करो या सिगरेट पीना बंद करो ये काटना बंद करो, because that's the end result. The focus becomes completely an alliance that is looking at the emotion, the processing, and the context which led to the self-cutting or the smoking or the drinking or the late coming. And once the adolescent knows that you're not going to be saying कि भैया सिगरेट पीना बंद करो, स्वास्थ्य हेल्थ के लिए सही नहीं है, सेहत के लिए सही नहीं है, या ये कब तक चलेगा ये काटना. देखिए अब टाके भी पड़ गए हैं, 2 टाके डालने पड़े because it was a deep cut. You will look at, like I said the last time, at tension reducing strategies, at stress alleviation strategies. You will look at mitigating circumstances that caused the stress in the first place. You will look to parents to say, don't bring this conflicting dialogue for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. Learn to tolerate your own stress so that you're not constantly getting into. That's the kind of family related therapeutic work that one does. The last thing in the second major theme of psychotherapy is practical issues in therapy implementation. How do we reach the underprivileged? How do you tailor an intervention to suit the temperament of a child? How do you implement teleconsultation? How do you provide a cultural context to therapy? And how do you handle parental perception of them always being right, particularly because they're in a position of care and responsibility for the child? Now, the website that I spoke to you about focuses a lot on the underprivileged. And if you particularly look at not the section on interventions, but the section on training, if you navigate the website, nimhanschildproject.in, and you click on the section on training and scroll down to judiciary and click on children in conflict with the law, the monograph, as well as the manual, you'll see pathways to vulnerability. So 7-8 pathways to vulnerability and how each of them can be addressed. Peer pressure, ADHD, family issues, attachment injuries and neglect, educational issues and school dropout issues, child labor. And how do you address each of these? Because therapeutic paradigms are not just about one-on-one CBT dynamic issues. It's also about the social context of intervention, which is why we have shifted from this paradigm of trauma-informed care to healing-centered engagement. Don't focus on symptoms. Don't focus on trauma-informed care, which is still about PTSD and all that. But you're looking at healing-centered engagement. That the last couple of things in psychotherapy, specific forms of therapies, the sub-themes, existential issues in therapy, mindfulness-based and theater of the oppressed. I particularly want to stress on theater of the oppressed. This is a technique of Augusto Boal, B-O-A-L, Brazilian senator, activist. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't win it. He passed away. He was a protege of Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, jahan he takes themes of oppression and he has very interesting concepts that can be borrowed into therapy. Theater of the oppressed is one theme. The other is called Rainbow of Desire. So given a situation, there are 7 options. जो सतरंगी इंद्रधनुष के 7 रंग जो हैं, what are the various options? Then he's got something called cop in the head of internal oppression. So I'm just introducing these concepts to you. Like I promised Amrit, 2 दिन का नोटिस दीजिए, एक सेशन थिएटर ऑफ ऑपरेस पे कर दूंगा, 1 दिन का नोटिस नींद से उठा के कीजिए, सेक्सुअल ट्रॉमा पे कर दूंगा. बट आई डोंट वांट टू हॉग थर्सडे म्यूसिंग्स, माफ कीजिएगा. आईपीएस बिरादरी में काफी और लोग हैं, you must listen to them, but I am passionate about therapy and therapeutic processes. और मेरा सौभाग्य होगा अगर आईपीएस ओडिशा और थर्सडे म्यूजिंग्स जो भी चलाते हैं, वो ये सोचे कि हमें अवसर मिले तो ये मेरा सौभाग्य होगा, लेकिन ये I will leave it to Amrit and Tofan sir and Alim Siddiqui's judgment. और थेरेप्यूटिक वर्क विद चिल्ड्रन इसका मैंने ऑलरेडी किया है, एंड डिलीवरिंग मेंटल हेल्थ सॉल्यूशंस इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020. इस पे इससे जुड़ी भी मेरे पास मटेरियल है. आपको आश्चर्य होगा, नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में मेंटल हेल्थ और वेलबींग को लेके इतना जिक्र हुआ है, and I'll be happy to share. I have a separate presentation for that, of how much mental health and well-being has been referred to in NEP. My last thing, which is the third major theme, which is parenting during adolescence. There were some general queries about attachment and the father's role in identity formation, about positive parenting, cultural differences in parenting, and contemporary challenges, which is generation gap between parents. And then there were some specific issues, sub-theme on difficulties in parenting. So challenging behaviors kaise handle kare, conflicting ideas about particularly with schooling and issues around sexuality, how to handle children's use of web series, mobile vagara, and how do you handle the blame parents face in popular media and its impact, and how do you handle parental guilt as though they are responsible for the child's problems. So ये जो तीसरा थीम जो था पेरेंटिंग ड्यूरिंग एडोलेसेंस, उसका सब थीम एक था डिफिकल्टीज. उस सब थीम में अदर थीम्स दैट इमर्ज विद चैलेंजिंग बिहेवियर्स, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस, स्पेसिफिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट, social media वगैरह, and the kind of parent bashing that is taking place. And एक और जो था वो साइकोपैथोलॉजी से जुड़ी हुई, suicidality and non-suicidal self-injury, depression and handling parents with mental illness. तो ये कुछ चीजें थी, 3 major themes. In each theme there were sub-themes, and each sub-themes there were. So this is the broad framework of what I wanted to basically share to clear the mystery. Now, what this has done is that this has created more and more individual topics that I can see. I can already see that Jyoti Shetty and Hema Ratnani already saying कि Theatre of the Oppressed पे एक session किया जाए. I mean, I'd be happy to do that at the risk of hogging Thursday Musings, which is not my intention at all. But like I said, what a wonderful initiative of IPS Odisha branch to really look at therapeutic processes that बहुत कम इस पे डिस्कशन होता है. आप सबको मालूम है डिपार्टमेंट्स ऑफ साइकेट्री और ट्रेनिंग में थेरेपी पे कितना ध्यान होता है, और खास करके थेरेप्यूटिक प्रोसेसेस पे. And I think this is just a terrific initiative, and it will be my honor and privilege to really continue with any of these nuances that I have shared here. So I will stop at this stage, and I will hand it over to the organizers to basically facilitate the last stage of Thursday Musings, the 15th edition.
Chairpersons can now give their remarks.
Well, before I would like to request Dr. Brigadier Raju, I just would like to express my feeling. We were as if sitting in a drawing room and talking very casually in a very relaxed manner, in a very informal manner, in a Seshadri. And what a excellent presentation. I mean, the type of presentation, a very difficult topic, a little unfamiliar for some of us because we don't practice this in our day-to-day practice. But even then, he has made it so, lucid and, so interesting. Thank you, Shekhar, for your excellent presentation. And especially, I am very happy that you have presented in a very relaxed manner. And I'd like to request Dr. Raju now for his comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah. Well, firstly, congratulations to Professor Seshadri for choosing a difficult subject, I must say. As Jayanta has said, that generally it is not practiced by most of us actually. But I think he has sown some seeds in the minds of all of us, which should strike root and grow probably in due course of time, particularly the teachers among us who are there, which has to need focus, particularly in the training of the developing psychiatrists already. People who are hardwired already probably maybe a little difficult for them to gain experience in this area, like I probably. But Dr. Seshadri touched on main areas of life skill training. My idea of life skill training is generally but is there in the NCERT books and syllabus of examination preparedness and all that. But there is so much to it actually first time I've come to know. In psychotherapy, he focused on therapeutic alliance. I wonder if I can request Professor Shekhar to do a session on therapeutic alliance only in the next conference of industrial psychiatry in Pune, which we are going to sometime next year. There's a very important topic. It's actually applicable to all types of psychotherapy, therapeutic alliance, and parenting during adolescence. I believe that there's a deficiency and problems in parenting very much because families have become nuclear. And for small problem, they go to a school counselor, and they are also probably school counselors, not that much experience to handle these issues. Dr. Seshadri talked about the national education policy. I don't know how it can be addressed to in a large school audience. I think we have about 30 crore school-going students, and how you deliver these things at every school. That's very it's a gigantic task. But then once we apply ourselves in India, I think we do well in every area. So probably we will come some answers we will find, like they found for the learning disabilities. I think that the government has made some program. Like probably this also will be able to do it. So with this, I think this thing, and thanks once again to Professor Shekhar Seshadri, and the request again for a session in Therapeutic Alliance in the Industrial Psychiatric Conference at Pune sometime next year. Thank you very much.
With the permission of Dr. Tufan Pati and moderator, I'd like to put one more comment if you are permitted.
Sir, all yours. Yes, all
Okay.
yours.
You see, I also have a feeling, Dr. Shekhar, you see, of course, this is very important for all the, psychiatrists or clinical psychologists who are in this mental health profession. But I also feel that these messages should go to the general public, parents and teachers. I always feel so. And, a lot of us are working apart from our clinical settings in outreach program, communicating and in touch with our teachers. I also have a small organization here, Mon Niramoy, through which I do a lot of programs in the schools, try to, pass these messages to the teachers and time to time involving parents. Shekhar, if you remember, last year I tried to invite you for a public, interactions, and somehow because of your busy schedule, you could not make it. What is your feeling about that? Do you think, apart from keeping these things in our clinical settings, in our professional framework, should we pass it to the teachers and the parents, involving them and giving them some idea about these issues?
I wanted to say, Jayantada, that the landscape of the practice of child mental health cannot be restricted to the clinic, because for every one child that manages to reach us, there are 99 others who will never manage to reach us.
Yeah.
So all the sectors that spaces and that children occupy and inhabit, homes, schools, childcare institutions, the street, workspaces, have to be reached. And how does one enable this? And this is one of the reasons why I have been a very strong believer in public health and in public child mental health.
Yeah, me too. Me too, yes.
Public child mental health means, how do you take non-professional service providers
Exactly.
and give them a series of skills which are called as first level responses. And it is as simple as this example that I give you about a 35-year-old man who came to school 22 years after he had left to meet his teacher who was just retiring, and he's a techie in the US, and goes to her and says, "Teacher, do you remember me?" And the teacher says, "Uh, no, sorry, child, I don't." And he says, "But teacher, but I have never forgotten you. I don't know if you remember, my name is so and so. I came from a very terrible family background. And the truth is, I have not reconciled with my family and I am not in contact with them. On a particularly bad day at home, I don't know what it is that you saw on my face in class. And I distinctly remember you did not do me the indignity of calling me out in front of other children. You waited till they had left and quietly called me aside and said, "Child, uh, बड़े गुमसुम लग रहे हो, कोई बात है क्या?" And I told you what had happened at home. And it's not that you did anything great. You just said it must have been so difficult to keep all that inside of you. I'm so happy that you told and shared this with me. And in future, if there's any way in which I can possibly help you, please don't hesitate to tell me. And teacher, I have never ever forgotten that act of kindness. This is child mental health.
Yes, exactly. So last time you couldn't make it. So how about next year? I would like you to be here in Guwahati and, public, sensitize public and teachers especially. I know this is not the platform to put such kind of an invitation through this, but even then, I'd like to have you here and interact with the public and the teachers especially.
Yeah. I can see that a lot of questions are coming on school mental health and all that. I just wanted to very quickly say that the school tech
Now
center.
over to moderator, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, let me start with a question which has been going around since your last talk. It was not in the question box. It was regarding empathy. You said that children are born empathetic. So ऐसा क्यों है, sir? मतलब, is it a evidence or is it your thought, or what is the evidence for it? That children are born empathetic and parenting destroys it. Parenting, school, and growing up destroys it.
ये तो मैं ऐसे ही मजाकिया कर रहा था. Let's not bash parents up here. I'm just saying that no, but this is a fact that babies start crying if they see someone else crying without knowing why that person is crying. And the knowledge base that is added, it's a process of socialization. And parents are not the only source of socialization, though they're a major source that was meant to be taken in a slightly lighter fashion. But children do have a natural sense of fairness, and of empathy. And it's a question of sustaining and maintaining that, through pro-social activities and through principles of what we call as egalitarianism in families, जिसको हम समान अधिकारी परंपरा कहते हैं. समान अधिकारी परंपरा. That घर में सब बांट के काम करेंगे, ऐसा नहीं कि मेरा काम नहीं है, and मैं क्यों करूं, and that show a sense of egalitarianism, and that's where the whole principle of egalitarianism and empathy comes from. That
Probably it can be taught, but I wonder children are really empathetic. Probably they were born with inborn empathy. But for now, I think basically early part of childhood, they are rather self-centered, selfish, because they do not have formal operations yet, not come to imagine themselves in somebody's position. Not that easy for a child, I thought.
yes, you're right, Brigadier Raju, that if you look at Piaget's stage, the whole egocentrism that they think that and it is a particular stage, but see, Piaget's work was done many years ago, And while some principles of it still hold very intact in terms of cognitive processes, where emotional process, see, Piaget's stage is theory is more a stage of is a more theory of cognitive development, not so much about social development.
What is your opinion, Dr. Shekhar, in this regard to the neurobiological developmental process during childhood and adolescence? Does it play any role in developing empathy, or what is your opinion about it?
I don't think.
That would be a reductionist approach.
Okay.
And someone has actually put it on chat also, and it's a beautiful comment on the reductionist approach to neurobiology. But having said that, I must say one thing, because I see a lot of comments about children in conflict with the law. Chilka Mukherjee, for example, has also presented, asked for this, and so I want to mention neurobiology in this context. See, we must understand that maturity is not a birth date. कि 17 साल 364 दिन में आप मेच्योर नहीं है, रात के 12 बजे आपका हैप्पी बर्थडे टू यू। हम भी अगर बच्चे होते, नाम हमारा होता गबलू शबलू, खाने को मिलते लड्डू, और दुनिया कहती हैप्पी बर्थडे, दैट एंड यू ऑटोमेटिकली बिकम मेच्योर। Neurobiologically, even till 21, 22, the processes are continuing, which is why for children in conflict with the law, we need to look at the whole issue of synaptic pruning and myelination. And interestingly, if you look at decision making and judgment and ability, for risk taking impulsivity, interestingly, synaptic pruning occurs front to back and
Prefront, exactly.
occurs back to front, which means that those parts are the last to develop. And we must give that leeway in terms of neurobiology to look at how to advocate for adolescents who get into trouble. Nobody is a born criminal. Nobody is a born criminal.
Yeah, that's true. A new book by Sapolsky on this context and neurobiological development, behave, and the good and bad of it. I think he has encompassed everything. Anyway, so go ahead. Moderator, you can take over now.
Thank you. Sir, Dr. OP sir has given a very nice observation that as therapists, we are very, very judgmental in the way we, talk, in the way we behave. And there is another question from one of the Dr. Sharda. Why I take her name? Because she has been instrumental in putting together this Thursday musings also. She has asked, are there any practices or experience or anything which helps in becoming a better therapist? So from being non-judgmental, what are the things that we can incorporate into us to make us better therapists?
Dr. Sharda, one of the things that you'll find on this website is our material on basic interview and communication skills. Actually, therapeutic technique is more about, and empathy is more about communication and helpful responses. And communication has many parts. We sometimes take the whole issue of rapport building for granted. कि हाँ, हमको तो मालूम है रैपो बिल्डिंग इजीली, हेलो कैसे हो, एक्सक्यूज मी, लेकिन आपने तो अपना नाम, अपना परिचय नहीं बताया, आप है कौन? I mean, how am I supposed to believe you and know you, just because someone has introduced you to? So if you look at our sections on interview and communication skills, which we have given in the section on training in this website, and under judiciary, interestingly, in the POXO manual, developmental and mental health issues in evidence gathering under POXO, developmental and mental health implications of evidence gathering under POXO. इसमें पूरा stage by stage, how do you establish rapport? उसके 3 stages हैं. How do you introduce yourself? How do you set the context? How do you address the anxieties they have in their mind so that they know, okay, then to set the context of this particular session. So all this Dr. Sharda has given in quite a bit of detail with examples that, so please do go ahead and have a look at it. And these are the building blocks. We call them building blocks. So एक और section है training. In this, is training section made, there are 3 manuals. One is called building blocks. The second is called loss and trauma. And the third is which dealing with children in conflict with law. आप building blocks वाला manual देखेंगे तो इसमें भी काफी अच्छी details दी गई हैं कि किस तरीके से आप approach कर सकते हैं. Over to you, Amrit. And
सर देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम डॉक्टर शाजिया सर. अगर नहीं पूछूंगा तो घर आज खाना नहीं मिलेगा. Shazia is asking how to give comfort to a child with trauma and make the child safe without being patronizing.
Right. I'll give a response, but before that, I would like to draw your attention to the module on the section on training and the module on loss and trauma. So, isme aapki responses that now a lot of how you respond to the child depend on the stage that the child is in. If the child is in a stage of agitation, वो बेताबी और बेचैनी की situation में है, at that time, what is the technique? If the child is silent and withdrawn but not in agitation, what should your response be? So, just to give you an example, context, experience, inner voice, emotion, behavior. Context, single parent family, institutional. Experience, trauma, abuse. Inner voice, फिर होगा क्या मेरे साथ ऐसा? क्यों हुआ मेरे साथ? वो देखने में ऐसा लगता है. Emotion, fear, agitation, behavior, withdrawal, screaming, shouting that. Your response should not be to the manifest behavior. Calm down, because how can the child calm down when your response should be to the emotion behind the behavior, to say, I understand, or I assume that you're upset about something. And can we speak about, so the child immediately knows that at least someone is recognizing I'm upset. And then to go one beyond that to the inner voice, to say, मेरे साथ फिर ऐसा होगा क्या? To say, I understand you're afraid whether this will be repeated. Let me assure you that we will ensure the kind of safety. You're in the hospital, you're safe right now, or I have spoken to your grandmother to whose house we are sending that. So these are some examples of how do you recognize the source of a particular behavior, and you acknowledge and validate the emotion and its legitimacy. You understand the question, the doubt, जो दुविधा, द्वंद, विडंबना उसके मन में है, and you address that rather than the manifest behavior. So just some responses, but more details of that are given in the manual on loss and trauma under the section on training in the website that we've given. Very simple techniques that you can use. Over to you, Alim, Amit.
Yeah. Sir, there's an interesting question that always comes to us when we are doing webinars this post-COVID time. COVID has brought a lot of isolation in children. There's a question, particular question from Kerala, where they are telling that there is a lot of young suicides currently occurring in Kerala. So how to handle the children during COVID times, be it in terms of the digital hygiene, online, spending too much time in online and being isolated. So your tips.
Amrit, in response to the question, I would like to say something. There is a difference between loneliness, solitude, and isolation. Loneliness, solitude, and isolation. And I will link this up with the self-harm and suicide issue. Loneliness is something that you feel when you're unsupported, abandoned, discarded, excluded, ostracized. Isolation can be imposed, enforced, or self-generated. You are isolated because you have COVID, you're isolated because you have a contagious disease, you're isolated because you're incarcerated, because you're a political dissident, or you have committed an offense. That solitude can also be enforced or chosen. Some artists like to be with people. They get their imagination, their creativity from nature, from people, from conversations. Some writers and painters like solitude, and they write and they paint in solitude. That so solitude is not equal to loneliness, is not equal to isolation. So you can be alone and reclusive, but you're not in. You may be physically isolated. That so when it comes to a situation of loss, there is Pauline Ross, ROSS, speaks about two kinds of loss: and ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is when a person is physically present but psychologically absent, like a family member who has schizophrenia or Alzheimer's, or a partner who's physically present but he's or she's busy on her own trip, ghar der se aana, no participation in family activity, and so on. Or when a person is physically absent but psychologically present, like lost in action, body was never found, missing, physically absent, but closure has not taken place. That now, what does this have to do? Isolation have to do with self-harm? That it's a question of how the circumstances that impose isolation and create a circumstance and your response to the circumstance, and suicidality in terms of the phenomenological spectrum of suicidality in terms of imposed isolation is: I am in a difficult situation. My difficult situation is intolerable. I do not wish to live. I wish to die and I wish to kill myself. They are not the same. They are a spectrum of suicidality. And as far as therapeutics are concerned, it's important to catch where this individual is in the spectrum of suicidality so that the therapeutic intervention enables, assists them not to proceed in the dimension to more severe forms where they proceed from my situation is intolerable to I do not wish to live, or I cannot carry on this way. So this is how we really look at this phenomena to address it.
Yeah, so there is a question from Pooja Kapoor. How can empathy be taught in school? Are there any workshops or online training programs for this? So your views on this aspect. Can we teach empathy?
I had mentioned this in some detail, but I will reiterate it because it's important. It's arguable whether core empathy can be taught or not, but what we have found in our training is if you teach communication and if you teach helpful responses, it automatically generates empathy. So what we often do in schools when we actually work on principles of empathy is we discuss what is called in social theory as othering, the other, the self and the other. And othering is where exclusion or inclusion takes place. So it's about imagination. It's about other people's lives and their predicament, the downtrodden, the marginalized, the excluded. So who are the people who are marginalized? And it is not done in judgmental or sermonizing ways कि तुम्हें मालूम है कि लोग किस तरह की बेबस स्थिति में जीते हैं It's not like that. It's who are the people who are marginalized? Women, old people, people with disability, children, people who are HIV positive, sex workers, LGBT community. So you do a listing of, and then you look at what are the theories of marginalization and oppression. What are the different kinds of oppression that? Chal, let's do an essay on South Africa and Nelson Mandela. Let's do an essay on the Dalit movement, Dalit literature के बारे में करते हैं. अंबेडकर बुद्धिस्ट क्यों बने? They do assignments of this nature. So Paulo Freire, who was Augusto Boal's contemporary, calls this process as conscientization. जमीर जो है अपनी, जमीर का उभर के आना, conscientization, that. तो हम लोग स्कूल में बड़ा सिंपल सवाल पूछते हैं, जैसे पिछली बार मैंने शायद पूछा होगा, between loyalty and fairness, which is a superior value? वफादारी और नीति न्याय, which is a superior value? And you know, people say फलाना फलाना that. बड़ा सिंपल एग्जाम्पल है. अमृत और मैं दोस्त हैं, बड़े अच्छे दोस्त हैं. तूफान पति एक छोटा बच्चा है. अमृत उस पे जुल्म करता है, उसको मारता है. लॉयल्टी मीन्स आई विल ट्राई टू प्रोटेक्ट अमृत. फेयरनेस मीन्स आई विल टेल हिम, अमृत तू हमेशा मेरा दोस्त होगा, लेकिन तूने जो किया वो गलत था. So fairness is always a superior value over loyalty. तो इस तरीके से, you know, we do school programs to really build empathy, pro-social work. हम स्कूल में करते थे. झारखंड में हमारी परवरिश हुई है और कैथोलिक स्कूल में जाते थे, पादरी वगैरह थे, लेकिन हर हफ्ते श्रमदान था हमारा. सड़क का रिपेयर करना, लेप्रेसी कॉलोनी में जाना. तो श्रमदान जो है, ओके, एहसान नहीं कर रहे हम, ये लोगों की एंटाइटलमेंट है. It's a socialist that we consider it as people's entitlement. तो ये धारणा जो है of people's entitlement to help, तो श्रमदान जो हम करते हैं, किसी पे एहसान नहीं कर रहे हैं, ये हमारी जिम्मेदारी है. और लोग अधिकृत हैं, ये समाज का अधिकार है इस श्रमदान का बेनिफिट्स को पाना. तो ये कुछ धारणाएं हैं. जब स्कूल में शामिल किया जाता है तो संभव है कि जैसे मैंने कहा 10 में से 8 लोग इसको अपनाएंगे, 2 लोग ऐसे होंगे नहीं अपनाएंगे. बट अगर आप करेंगे नहीं तो 10 में से 8 इसको नहीं अपनाएंगे. दो इन एनी केस they have basic goodness that, but there are 6 people you can transform, and this belief in transformation is very critical to therapy, however difficult an adolescent may be. कि डॉक्टर साहब हम तो we are fed up, इसका कुछ नहीं होगा, इसको बस हम हिम्मत हार चुके हैं, but you have to believe in the potential of transformation.
In continuation of your answer, sir, there's an interesting question, sir. How do we deal with children who are in conflict with law?
We follow the pathways to vulnerability paradigm, and we look at, for example, if you look at a child who's come into conflict with law for an offense that is sexual in nature. Now, where does this emanate from? Is it a first offense? Is this a kid who was exposed to pornography and had some curiosity to experiment? Is this a kid who had been abused, and is it a or is it a consenting relationship between a 16 and a 17-year-old, and he's come into conflict with the law? They are actually in a loving relationship, and it was actually the girl who compelled him to run away, and a missing persons complaint was lodged. And then they were found a month later and they had engaged in intimacy, and then a kidnapping and rape charge is put on the boy, whereas he said ki nahi karte yaar, 2 साल इंतजार कर लेते हैं, and she said नहीं नहीं नहीं, and you know, so there's a reverse gender problem in the in the way that POCSO is, and we have a lot of problems with these consenting kind of. So we look at the same paradigm that I said when we work with these kids about what is the nature of the relationship, about safety, health, boundaries, privacy, consent. See, there's a difference between a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old in a consenting relationship and a 17-year-old and a 4-year-old child. So that differential, that, and even there, one is not judgmental. कि अकल कहाँ पे घास चरने गई थी तेरी 4 साल की बच्ची है, you know, are you nuts or are you crazy that, you know, that, as opposed to, you know, looking at the implications of, and for this kid to understand the notions of relationships, health, safety, privacy, boundaries, consent, one's own safety and the safety of the other person also. Happy, healthy, safe, and responsible sexuality. So we use these kind of paradigms to actually work with children in conflict with the law.
Yeah, so there is a repeated question coming regarding, would you like to comment on the neurobiological aspects? How is the behavior formed and changed? The neurobiology of it, would you like to delve into it?
I think I have addressed it quite a bit. एक तरफ से देखा जाए जनाब आलिम, सभी न्यूरोबायोलॉजी है, ये भी न्यूरोबायोलॉजी है, ये भी सब तो बायोलॉजी ही है. खाली हाथ आना है, खाली हाथ जाना है, मरेंगे तो या तो दफनाए जाएंगे या जलाए जाएंगे, बनना नाइट्रोजन और ऑक्सीजन और कार्बन ही है, सब तो बायोलॉजी ही है.
I think we should we are talking about something on psychological management, discussing neurobiology and all these things. I think it's not relevant. I think, and we have very little time. And you, as Seshadri said, you dig psychology, you'll find biology. After all, where is it all coming from? Let us remain focused on the topic at hand. That's what I feel. I mean, this is a huge topic. We can discuss many things in it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So another repetitive question that is coming is about the theater of the oppressed, sir. Sir, people want to know a little more about it, sir. If you can elaborate a little.
See, Augusto Boal has many techniques. Newspaper theater, legislative theater, invisible theater, cop in the head, rainbow of desire, theater of the oppressed. I give you brief descriptions. Invisible theater. Invisible theater is these actors go into a public space and a conflict is enacted. Two people are fighting and they wait to see how people respond. Do they say ki apna kya lena dena isse? You know, this whole bystander apathy and pro-social behaviors, or people, do they come and say, you know, hang on, you know, can I assist what has happened? And now, theater of the oppressed, what happens is that the people who are performing act out a scene of conflict. The people who are watching are not called spectators, they are called spect actors. And if you find that something is not going properly, a spect actor can intervene and say stop and come in and replace an actor and do the scene. So through a series of these kind of, you refine the way that an interaction, particularly one of conflict and oppression, can take place, so that you come to a consensus about how different forms of resolution can take place. So this is a typical theater of the oppressed technique. So that's approximately, so there are many theater of oppressed. So he's written a book called Theater of the Oppressed. Then he wrote the book called Rainbow of Desire. And one of his last books was called Aesthetics of the Oppressed, in which you know, he speaks about a project where he looks at the word, the sound, and the movement, and how you look at generating of poetry, of themes, of narratives, of different kinds of movement and sound. So he has something called image theater also. तो जैसे courage है तो उसका image कैसे होगा, या डर है उसका image कैसे होगा, and you create different kinds of images, and these are ways in which you get people who are participating in this theater technique to actually get a sense of the evocativeness of the various Boal techniques. So that's in short, the kind of stuff that.
Sir, we often go to schools and for awareness programs. So, क्या आप हमको कुछ ऐसी take home points या tips बताएंगे जो हम वहाँ जरूर discuss करें? A few 5 or 6 points that we can talk to with the parents, teachers, general public. What is our message to the general public?
Number one, whether it's a classroom or it's a home, the notion that a classroom or a home is a collaborative community where knowledge is jointly constructed. Knowledge is not handed down. Ye sahi hai, ye nahi hai, ye karo, ye mat karo. We construct knowledge jointly. Number two, this can happen only if there is a culture of conversations. वार्तालाप की संस्कृति जो है, मैं हमेशा कहता हूं कि अभिभावक और बच्चों का और अध्यापक और बच्चों का रिश्ता जो है, उसका आधार, उसकी संस्कृति जो है, वो है आदेश, उपदेश और अपेक्षा. Instruction, expectation and obedience, not a culture of conversations. So how do you build a culture of conversations so that there's an openness? No problem in asking any questions. The message you're giving is, I am open to all discussion. I'm not saying I'm open to all behaviors. Jo marzi karo. That's not what I'm saying. I'm open to all discussion. 18 साल के बाद एडल्ट हो, तुम्हारी जिंदगी जो करना करो. लेकिन till that point of time, I'm open to all discussion. Third is to engage in activity. Because activity or process-based approaches, any kind of life skills education, therapeutic, the more process-based it is. And what I mean by process-based is not ideas. तो एक हमने स्टोरी देखा, उस स्टोरी में पात्र है, वो फिल्म हो सकती है. दैट हाउ डू आई प्रोसेस इट? फर्स्ट लेवल प्रोसेसिंग इस स्टोरी में मेन कैरेक्टर का नाम क्या था और वो कहाँ रहता है. नाउ माय पॉइंट इज, व्हाई आर यू आस्किंग वेयर डज ही लिव? व्हाट इज योर इंटेंशन इन आस्किंग दैट क्वेश्चन? अपने घर में रहता है, किराए के घर में रहता है, झुग्गी में रहता है, आलीशान मकान में रहता है, अपने घर में रहता है, 1 BHK है कि 3 BHK, अटैच्ड बात है नहीं है, खाना कहाँ बनता है. So see, it gives you a sense of the universe that an individual comes from and how that universe defines the well-being of his identity. जहां पानी के लिए स्ट्रगल है, खाने के लिए स्ट्रगल है, there is a struggle for daily resources. And why is aggression and suicidal behavior is very common in inner city areas where there's a lot of competition for water, there's a lot of domestic violence that takes place and all that. So these are some very common things that we bring into the kind of conversations that we have with our children, both at homes and in schools, so that they construct knowledge about people, about relationships, about the world, about inequity, about equity, about egalitarianism, about empathy, about fairness, about behavior, about choices, about aspirations, and about dreams. And what contribution and mark will I make in the small world that I live in? I realized, my friends, when I was 27 years old, that I was not going to make any great contribution to science. I'm not going to be world famous, win Falana award and all that. मैं हमेशा कहता हूँ, मेरे लिए सत्य का एक ही क्षण है. The only moment of truth for me is when my child client is sitting in front of me. All the rest is approximation and appropriation. तो मेरी छोटी सी दुनिया में जो मुझे करना है, मैं कर रहा हूँ. IPS उड़ीसा से जब इनविटेशन मिलता है मैं अपने आप को भाग्यशाली महसूस करता हूँ। 200-300 लोग हैं, उनसे मुलाकात होती है, कुछ आइडियाज एक्सचेंज होती हैं, इतना मेरे लिए बस है। आईपीएस के 7,000-8,000 जो लोग हैं, I'm reaching everyone, making an impact of everyone, and making an impact on those they are making an impact on. I don't know. If it happens, I'm very happy. But as much as you can do, let's do it. As much of an impact that you can have, and maximize it. That's the kind of discussion that I would say that we have within families and within schools.
You are definitely making that impact. We know that. We can vouch of it. Sir, एक supplementary question. एक parent ने बोला कि sir, whenever I try to strike a conversation, वो बच्चा तो फोन लेके ही बैठा रहता है, उसको उसमें इंटरेस्ट है, आ रहा हूँ करके, और जब तक मेरे ऑफिस जाने का टाइम हो गया. So the parent's time is limited and child is more interested in looking up the mobile. So ऐसे में उसको क्या करना चाहिए? What मतलब क्या how to handle this?
नेगोशिएशन शब्द जो है ये बुरा शब्द नहीं है. बात सिर्फ इतनी है भाई, 2 मिनट की अगर फुर्सत हो इस कॉल के बाद और अगले कॉल से पहले, एक बड़ी मजेदार चीज हुई थी, आपसे बस शेयर करना चाहता हूं. 2 मिनट ही लगेंगे. एज अपोज टू सेइंग 40 मिनट हो गए बात कर रहे हो और कितनी देर बात करोगे, कब तक ऐसा चलता रहेगा. See, look at the difference in the conversation and the dialogue and the semantics and the semiotics of it. या तब इंतजार मत कीजिए जब 40 मिनट बात किए जा रहा है और आपको लग रहा है कि टेंशन में है आपकी, पता नहीं किससे बात कर रहा है, क्या बात कर रहा है, अश्लील बातें कर रहे होंगे, कितने मतलब बदतमीज हैं आजकल के बच्चे. योर इनर वॉइस इज ऑल ऑफ दैट before itself you decide, you have, I completely respect your time with your friends, your phone time, no problems, no interference. We'd like to have some family time also, even if it is 15 minutes. That's all I'm asking. And let's enjoy ourselves. Create a special ritual around it. And once it's a ritual everyone enjoys, and it's not 1 hour, and you're not resenting the rest of the 7 hours that he's speaking on the phone. You're creating these small islands of making the relationship and communication there. या कुछ कैजुअली पूछ लीजिए, वो फोन पे नहीं है कि अपना फोन को दिए, बोले कि यार ये बात कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रही, ये टेक में, ये इसको, फिर उसने कुछ समझाया, कुछ बताया कि यार thank you, yeah, you guys are just terrific. How much you people know, you're digital natives, we're digital immigrants. That very glad that you're my son. कभी ऐसा बोला है आपने? नाज है यार तेरे पे. See, we are all, our own expectations and our frustrations of, we have an image that, like our children are our business investment. कि यार इन्वेस्ट किया है, साला रिटर्न ही नहीं मिल रहा है इसका, न रेस्पेक्ट करता है, न बात करता है. Children are not your business investments. You chose to marry, if you're heterosexual, and chose to have children for some other reason, that because you celebrate the continuity of life, and you celebrate the individuality and the remarkable growth of these people as individuals with their own thoughts and aspirations and dreams. They can't be clones of what you imagined and expected that they want to be.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in Alim's case, it is the reverse. His son and daughter wants to talk to him, is always on the mobile. How do you handle such parents? So another interesting question I wanted to ask you, what are the tips you would give to single parents? There are a lot of single parents, losing their partners, divorced, separated, not staying together. So any special tips for single parents?
You know, Amrit, the issue is not so much about intact family, single parent, by virtue of death, divorce, or desertion. The point is, how is it contextualized for a child? एक जमाना था जब धारणा यही थी कि कोई बच्चा अगर तलाक के हालात से आता है, that he comes from a situation of divorce, he necessarily or she necessarily has to be screwed up. That's not true. It depends on how the single parent actually contextualizes it to say, look, your dad and I could not get together well. It has nothing to do with you. You are most welcome to be in touch with him, unless that fellow is a horrible fellow and is, abusive, and that's a different issue. You're most welcome to keep your independent relationship with him. मुझे कोई आपत्ति नहीं है that we could not get along. You're not to blame. You're not responsible. And I would encourage you to, to have your independent relationship with him. That, and my relationship with you is special. That it's a question of how you contextualize it. So, even in therapy, contextualization, संक्षिप्त में कहा जाए, context matters. संदर्भ अति आवश्यक है. संदर्भ को पहचानो, संदर्भ को स्थापित करो और संदर्भ को लेके प्रक्रिया को आगे बढ़ाओ. Over to you.
Yeah. Sir, there is one therapy called half therapy जिसमें एक कंटाप पड़ता है. So we were treated with that in our childhood, but now we cannot treat our children the same way. This is the question coming. So what are your opinions on this? People want to hit the child, they'll be sued, or क्या कर सकते हैं सर? So your views.
ये देखिए, इसकी दो चीजें हैं. जहां तक कि पेरेंटिंग का प्रश्न है, एंड देयर आर सम दिस whole triple P program from Australia, the positive parenting program. It's one of the, other than Kasdan's program on parent management training, which are evidence-based methods of doing parenting. And you can look up triple P as well as Kasdan's parent management training. Triple P is from Australia. My father brought me up this way, therefore I will also bring up my child this way. My father brought me up this way, therefore I will never bring up my child this way. It works both ways. That बात रही मिसयूज की, that जिसने किसी को मिसयूज करना है, it doesn't matter, he or she will do it irrespective of what kind of a parent you are. That, and I think the key of this whole anxiety and concern about misuse really lies on a very fundamental Ericksonian construct of basic trust versus mistrust. किसी भी रिश्ते की का नींव जो है, उसका फाउंडेशन अगर ट्रस्ट पे नहीं हो, तो फिर ये यूज मिसयूज वाला दैट एंड ट्रस्ट बिल्डिंग इज बेस्ड ऑन ट्रांसपेरेंसी, एंड ट्रांसपेरेंसी इज अ कम्युनिकेशन इशू. जहां बातचीत ही नहीं होती और रिश्ते का आधार केवल अपेक्षा है, इट्स ओनली एक्सपेक्टेशन, बट देयर इज नो डायलॉग, देयर इज नो कम्युनिकेशन, देन ट्रस्ट विल नॉट कम. दैट एसेंस is defined by activity. The essence of a good marriage is defined by the activity in that marriage. You can't say I have a good marriage, but you're never around, to do things together. That essence is defined by an activity is a term that's not mine. It is actually either it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau's or Jean-Paul Sartre, one of those two. कि तत्व जो है विश्वास या अविश्वास का यूज या मिसयूज का तत्व जो है वो एक्टिविटी पे निर्भर करता है. And the more joint activities we have where we discuss and do things, the more there is trust, and you know that there will never be a breach of that trust. That's how I will approach it, rather than function from a position of concern and anxiety कि बहुत ज़्यादा छूट दे तो अवश्य misuse होगा उसका. So this authoritative and permissive parenting, this notion ki, so the idea is not to be authoritative or permissive, this a more balanced approach to parenting. So perhaps we can do a session on parenting. Amrit, the number of topics for the number of sessions that I have to do.
Just increasing.
We have to do a Saturday Musings.
Press karna hai, parenting.
We'll take one last
Sir,
question.
Dr. Gautam.
No, let
Gautam
me
sir
raise the
wants to
issue.
ask.
Yes, tell.
Sir, I
I
think
shall
Gautam
raise-
sir wants.
Gautam sir's question ले लो.
Hello, Dr. Shekhar, Seshadri. You have done wonderful job. But my question is, some parents are coming and telling their kids are lying. But the situation is important. We discussed about that, whether there is any fear or not. But sometimes it is found that it might be the pathological lying. I mean, after understanding, after convincing everything, still they are continuing. What is your take on it?
I want to, Gautam does a question. I want to qualify by stealing, lying are pejorative terms. That we don't use the term stealing when we talk to children. We say taking things from people without their permission. And so why does a child take something from someone without that person's permission? Because you're needy, because it's attractive, because you're jealous, because you want to take revenge, because you want to show off, because you feel entitled. So we look at these background causes rather than the fact of taking things from someone's permission. Similarly with lying, as opposed to misrepresentation of facts, झूठा कहीं का, मुंह खोलता तो झूठ बोलता है साला. As opposed to बच्चे जैसे कि बड़े झूठ नहीं बोलते. अपने पार्लियामेंट को ही देख लीजिए, सबके सब बैठे हुए झूठे वादे करते हैं. फिर हाँ, हमें वोट दीजिए, आपका सेवा करेंगे, और भरे पड़े हैं झूठे. तो झूठा संसार है मेरे भाइयों बहनों. सारा संसार ही झूठा है. तो बच्चों को क्यों हम दोषी पैथोलॉजिकल बोलते हैं? बट कमिंग बैक टू द कोर ऑफ गौतम दास क्वेश्चन, दैट why do children do this? Is it for fear of reprimand? Is it fear of punishment? Is it fear of being denied? That is it fear of being held responsible? That so behind the act of lying is always the basis of fear, of anxiety, and we do not recognize that. Rahi baat pathological, the term pathology, and Gautam Das raised a very important issue. The pattern, and you know how symmetric patterns are, and the interesting thing which Gautam Das raised is that even pathological families have patterns.
Correct.
जिसको हम pathological lying या pathological gambling कहते हैं. There's a certain pattern, and the idea is to discern the basis of that pattern. ये pattern क्यों establish हुआ? Because the father was autocratic. सच बोलो तो भी मानते नहीं थे, तो एक बार झूठ बोला तो काम चल गया, तो वो पैटर्न बन जाता है. Now, how do you break that pattern? So that's the way I would interpret it, that not look at the fact of misrepresentation of facts, but to look at the basis of that pattern.
Dr. Tufan, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My question is related to what we have been discussing about the theater of the oppressed. I am not well informed. I want a clarification. I want to learn. The theater of oppressed, as Dr. Seshadri told about Follow, it was mostly a political move in Brazil. How exactly we can implement in case of a teenager or in a collective situation? Any major branch of theater of the oppressed, how exactly practically we can do?
Dr. Tufan, you're absolutely right. It started in a political context, in the context of oppression. But it has found more and more use in therapeutic settings. Interestingly, there is a book called, and I'll put it on chat, it's called Playing Boal, Theater, Therapy and Activism. It's written by lady,
Augustine Ball, right?
written by a lady called M. Katz, Playing Boal, Theater, Therapy and Activism. And there are some very interesting chapters there linking Boal's techniques with the techniques of Moreno of psychodrama. So while it started in the Brazilian context of oppression and the kind of social structure that Brazil had at that point of time, and India indeed is going the Brazil way. There are two Indias, just as there are two Brazils. You know, the very rich and the exceedingly. So this division is becoming more and more acute as we. But it then progressed to very many therapeutic settings, and Boal is now extensively used in psychology and in social theories, as well as in forms of social intervention to look at community healing and community psychology. So this book is called Playing Boal, Theater, Therapy and Activism, written by M. Katz. And a lot of therapeutic applications of Boal's techniques have been described in this book.
Thank you, Tufan, sir. So we'll
Amit, I
hand it
think
over
we
to the
should now-
chairpersons.
Yeah.
I think it's
Chairperson, sir.
Chairperson, sir.
Yes, Dr. Amrit.
Sir, it's over to you, sir. Then we'll end the session.
Okay, I think we
Very
had a
concluded.
very excellent and very stimulating session. For last more than, I think, 2 hours you have completed. Congratulations, Dr. Shekhar. We are delighted to have you today, and a lot of comments are there. Everybody appreciating your presentation and the vastness of your knowledge and the way you have made it very simple and very lucid. That is very, I'd like to appreciate that aspect of your presentation. So I think we have had a very, I would like to congratulate Odisha chapter of IPS. You have been doing an excellent job, a very good initiative, as has been mentioned by Dr. Shekhar. And we'd like to have more in future of this kind of a session. So I would like to request Brigadier Dr. Raju to give his final comment, and then over to moderator.
I think what
I'd like to thank you, all of you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, what I see from these discussions we have had over the last 2 years, 2 hours nearly, is that this topic needs a little longer discussion broken into shorter workshop, probably stretching over a period of one day. But what it did precisely is to sensitize us to the issues involved in this particular area. So he touched on broadly three areas: life skills, psychotherapy, and some, what is that, the parental during adolescence. So in that, there are so many subtopics. Obviously, it cannot be covered within, say, a 1 hour lecture. It's not possible. It's not possible also to answer questions to the satisfaction of everybody. But it is an important, I think, purpose is served is sensitize us to the issues involved in this area. Probably, again, we will have further subtopics of this individually and do discussions like this. And I must congratulate Dr. Professor Seshadri for doing such a lucid description, and he's involved in everything. You can observe it. He's passionate about things which he talks about. So we are very grateful for this wonderful session. I think we are enriched by this experience. Thank you, and thank you to Professor Topanpati and Alim and Amrut and all who are involved in this, bringing this topic to the surface. And as from the questions, I see so much of interest is generated. Thank you, everybody.
Dr. Tufan, sir, for your concluding remarks, Chairperson, organizing chairman. Sir.
I sincerely thank Dr. Seshadri. He has been kind to us all throughout, starting from our state conference to this. And he has taken up a very nice topic in a nice way. There are many questions. And the link he has given, I have gone through that link earlier also. That is quite profound. And anybody who wants to know further can go through that link. I sincerely am fortunate to have with me Dr. Alim and Dr. Amrit. And we have with us another 3 persons who have been contributing HRS, Sajia, Rucha, and Sharda, who contribute step by step when we go along with this Thursday musings, which will go along all the way. And I thank all the audience. There has been a nice audience, and we always have it. I thank our chairpersons, Professor M.S.P.K. Raju, who is so dear to me all the while, and Dr. Jayant Das, who is a good old friend of mine. I thank everybody. Okay, over to Amrit to conclude.
So thank you so much, sir. Sir, it has been a privilege to hear one of the greatest speakers I have ever heard. You know, every word he speaks, he has got some alternatives. It's something little different. They're all happy. You know, everybody is smiling. Everybody thinks that they're going away taking something. You know, not anything that the textbook teaches. So thank you so much, Dr. Shekhar, sir. And you don't have a speaker who analyzes all the questions, makes it into another presentation and sends. So that's something which Alim can never learn in his life. So thank you, Dr. Shekhar.
Thank you, Dr. Shekhar.
Sir,
hope to see you sometime in future.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to have you here in Assam, Guwahati. Yeah.
Sir, thank you, Dr. Raju, sir. Sir has been going through a very, very difficult time, bad time. We all, with you, sir. We all empathize with you. You have been like a father to us, to at least our Odisha State Branch, sir. We pray that you be safe. You get all the strength to. Thank you for coming, and I think this is your first public appearance, and we are grateful to you, sir. Dr. Jan, sir, you're having connectivity issues, but you connected at the right time, sir. So thank you for coming, for blessing Odisha State Branch and all the participants. Thank you all the participants. You have been wonderful coming again and staying with us. We have more than 380 or 390 participants, peak of 290 in the holiday season. Sir, Dr. Shekhar, it's all due to you. In spite of Alim being there, we had a very good majority today. Thank you, IPS OSB. You have been wonderful. They've always supported us. Thank you, Torrent. And with this, Dr. Seshadri will have you once again. So as far as you told, I told Alim, sir will be sleeping. We'll call him up, sir. You have to speak on CS. We'll have a talk on. And some people are suggesting we can have a workshop.
We'll call you when you're sleeping actually, and then we'll wake you up and bring you to the program.
Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Good night, Brigadier Raju.
Good night, everybody.
Hope to meet you, Dr. Raju.
Good night,
thank you, Dr. Tupanpati, Amrit, Alim, and everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
thanks a lot, Dr. Seshadri. But we'll be
Amrit, I
bothering you
will,
all the way. Many times.
Amrit,
Bol,
I will
Alim, bol.
take your car without telling you, as sir has told.
Sir, good night. Thank you, sir, again.
Good
Thank you,
night.
Good night, everyone.
सर सर है सर क्या
Sometime
लोगों ने
we'll
आपकी
deal with the
आवाज को
legal
एनालाइज
issues
किया?
involved in it also.
श्योर सर, श्योर सर।